What's up, guys? Styling Airsoft back here with another video, and showing my face. In all honesty, I finally got a new phone, so the camera quality is much better. It's gonna be in 4K, which is gonna be really nice. And also, I just don't have the best filming setup. It's much easier for me to actually hold things in front of a wide view camera like I have right now, and show you parts that way. Everything else will just be a voiceover while I'll zoom in or just take pictures and show them on screen like here. So pretty much an update about myself. I did graduate from undergrad, so that's something under my belt. I will be going to grad school in the fall, so I have a couple more months where I'm able to make a little bit more content for this channel. For this video, I wanted to go ahead and talk about one of the guns. I'm going to give you an update on all the different builds I've been doing because a lot of them have changed since the last time you saw them, for the better, of course. My skills are definitely getting better as time goes on. But today I wanted to talk about this guy right here, which is my Lancer Tactical AK-74S, or AKS-74U. Man, this thing has a story behind it. It's crazy. Now it's been so long since I've shown this gun on this channel that I think I might have deleted the original video. I might have uploaded one video of this gun shooting maybe for like 15-20 seconds back in 2015, 2016. But no, honestly, this is the gun that really got me through airsofting in high school. For my Sweet 16, I bought way more guns than I was really able to handle. I think I have 4 of them. All like JG cheap boneyard guns I was going to fix up and make them, sleepers. But that didn't come to fruition. I ended up breaking all of them. At one point, this was the only gun that worked for me, and I mean like only gun that worked. I'm talking like probably 16 rounds a second on a 11-1 lipo. Motor got really hot. Accuracy was meh at best, but I could go to the field and play with this thing. And ever since, this was the only gun out of like the other guns that were just in pieces, not working. I had to wait to get more parts for, and this was a trooper, so I kind of just had to keep it, Didn't want to get rid of it. I did change it around the way it looked. Flash hider you can't remove, so instead of painting, I just covered it in electrical tape because I'm lazy. It had a top rail for this quad rail system. I threw on a normal handguard on the top, and it looks a little more tactical that way. Other side, you can see here, the folding stock latch broke off. I think yeah, it's made of plastic, cheap plastic. This entire gun's pretty much plastic. Things I did upgrade was the charging handle, the upper receiver, the pistol grip, the stubby grip on the front end, and obviously the buttstock pouch on the back. But this gun, I think I did end up switching the gearbox in this one. I bought a stock D-Boys gun, or gearbox from Airsoft Magazine for like $35. Threw it in here. I've changed around a couple things. Just recently got done installing a MOSFET in here in my old Gate Warfet because I got a couple Jeftron opticals for my 2 AKs. I'm going to do videos on those as well, the V3 optical. So this is a hand-me-down MOSFET, and now this thing is shooting way better than it really needs to. This was supposed to be a backup gun, but the way it shoots, it's I honestly think I might start using this again a lot more when I go to the field. Let's not dilly-dally anymore. What are the stats or the specs, how this gun shoots? Well, I'm going to go ahead and start with the internals, and then I'll tell you the FPS and rate of fire. So I don't think I bought anything brand new for this gun at all, really. It's really just old parts I had lying, my parts bin behind me, or parts from my older guns that got replaced with newer parts and put into this thing. So it is originally a stock D-Boys gearbox, so $35. It gets you 7mm roller bearings, ball bearing spring guide, and ball bearing piston head. It's pretty much the same gearbox that came on the really old Lancer Tacticals, the Gen 1s, if you're old enough to remember those. Those had decent internals, I guess. You could throw an 11-1 lipo on them and they'd shoot like 18 rounds a second for a season before they broke, but they were so cheap you could buy a new one. Same gearbox as that. I have swapped out the bevel gear and the sector gear. Now, before I put through the MOSFET in here, I was getting weird, funky feeding issues or firing issues. It was firing like semi-auto or like 2-round burst only. I couldn't have like function full auto, so I swapped around the sector gear with a better Canvas SHS 18-1 sector gear and a KWA bevel gear. That just makes it sound a little bit more smoother than the stock one. Shimmed properly. I still have the stock roller bearings, the 7mm roller bearings in here. Took out the stock piston and replaced it with the Aries full metal rack piston from EFCS Gearbox, stock ball bearing piston head, stock cylinder. I believe it's the Element air nozzle. I got out of one of my old other AKs. Cyma full metal hop-up chamber, stock barrel, which I did lap. Promi purple bucking, silverback SRS tensioner on the hop-up, and a really beat up Starway 35K motor. But the tower broke on it. Not sure how. It was in my Phantom PW for the longest. But I threw on a stock Charlie tower on the end of it. Seems to be working pretty well, as you'll see in the chrono video. But yeah, it's pretty much all. Oh, and the gate warfare. Custom wiring throughout the back. You can see I have the pigtail sitting right here as well. So custom wiring. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, everything else that I didn't mention is completely stock. So I don't know how this was able to happen, but this thing shoots like 400 FPS on a 0.2 gram BB at 23 rounds a second. Stock compression components other than the air nozzle, stock spring guide, all that stuff, except the parts that I mentioned that I swapped out. But this thing is an absolute bruiser. So in here we have, I pull it out real quick, a zippy compact 2200 milliamp hour 3-cell LiPo battery. Just to show you guys the rate of fire on this thing. It's crazy how good these Warfets are on stock trigger contacts. So going through to semi-automatic. And full auto. Alright, so just to prove put my money where my mouth is, mag in. I'm shooting .25s. I would use .2s, but I don't have any more. So this is what a chrono's at. Oh, let me do it on this other side so you can see the readings. And I'll shoot at my very high-end BP catcher. 373, 374, 76, 373, 373.9. Throw it in full auto. 23.5, 23.5, 23.6, and mag is empty. So as you can see, this thing is well, it's made for outdoors. I didn't know what I was expecting to have from this thing, but it just goes to show you that experience really trumps parts that you just install in this thing. Just for reference, this thing shoots just as fast and harder than my AK-105. Now that chrono's in around 380 with the .2, so it's like 20 FPS lower. It's a little bit faster. That one's like 24.5, 25 rounds a second. Maybe 26, depending on the charge of the battery. So that one has a faster gear set ratio of 16:1 versus 18:1. It's a little bit faster. 30K motor versus 35K. That motor's a little bit stronger as well. Now, obviously, my AK-105 is definitely a more usable outdoor weapon. It has a much better hop-up setup. It has a Maple Leaf Super Mac bucking in there, a upgraded Type 4 inner barrel, which has been lapped better than this one. Modify accurate hop-up chamber, which is arguably better. Actually, it is better because it has better adjustments compared to this Cyma hop-up. And it has the Jeftron optical Leviathan MOSFET installed in as well. So it's a better gun through and through as far as just usability. It might not have the FPS, but I mean, at the end of the day, it still is a better weapon to use. But this thing, very, very close in performance, and I wasn't expecting it. Now, again, I'm going to go through a whole laundry list on the AK-105, but just bear in mind that gun is way more expensive than this one and has way more name brand parts in it. Tuning really comes down to the determination on whether your gun is going to shoot well or not. You can throw in the Siege-type gears, high-end, Angel Custom, Piston. You can throw in your long neck compression components, your Gate Titan Expert, you could spend $600, $700 on internal parts, right? If you don't tune them properly, they're not going to shoot well. And even if you don't have the highest end parts, if you're using OEM parts in your gun, it's still going to shoot well if you tune it properly. So I'm going to go over real quick some of the parts that I would recommend you guys buy if you just want to be able to tune a gun like this. I made a video in the past on the process of how to tune a gun properly, going through polishing the gearbox, gluing in your gears, or your bushings, trimming your gears properly, compression, lubrication, O-rings, that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go over, didn't actually go over the actual tools that I use, the tools and actual parts that I use to tune these different things. So I'm going to go ahead and show them to you right now and provide you all the specs on the screen with the parts that I buy. And you can use them in your guns as well. So in the past, you would have seen me tuning guns. I would use Teflon tape, different lubrications, different adhesives, and I make recommendations. This is going to be the updated video on parts that I use. So everything prior to this, honestly, you can listen to them, they do work, but these are the best ways to go about things. Starting off with things that stay the same, Super Lube, I'm a high advocate for using these. I need to get more of the synthetic. But Super Lube synthetic is what I use for all moving components, include your piston, your gears. That's pretty much the main moving components. I also put a little bit on the tapping plate as well. That can help with longevity. And I also use a silicone for all compression components. So O-rings on the piston head, on the inside the cylinder, air nozzle, air cylinder head stem is what I use the silicone Super Lube for. So you can use them for different, or you can cross use them if you really want to. But this is the way I use it, and that's the way I think most people go about them as well. In the past, I would have recommended things like super glue or like Gorilla Glue, epoxy, things like that to glue in bushings. And while that can work, the best way to do it is actually get the proper tool for it, and that would be bearing Loctite. You can buy this small bottle of bearing Loctite for like $23 on Amazon or from your Home Depot, local hardware store, wherever you might be. And this is made to hold in bearings or bushings and not let them move. Now you might be saying, this is a really small bottle. Well, you don't need that much. This is enough to last you quite some time. The difference between the Loctite, bearing Loctite, and something like a super glue is that the viscosity. So if you get a really light viscosity super glue, it's not going to hold the two pieces together very well. You want to have a good amount of material in between both metal surfaces. So you want to use maybe a gel or a thicker viscosity CA glue, or you could think about going to Gorilla Glue or an epoxy. The main issue with those is that it's a super tight tolerance between the bushing and the gearbox. So when you go to compress, the bushing in place in the gearbox, a lot of that, glue is going to actually push out to the side. It's going to be like kind of scraped off of the bushing. So you're not going to get that much glue between the two surfaces of the bushing and the gearbox. That's what I experienced. So I would wipe off the excess super glue or epoxy, whatever, and they would last for a little bit, but after a while, you just be able to pop them out really easily. With the bearing Loctite, it's very viscous, so it's going to be able to fit in that surface area, and it actually expands as it dries. It dries really quickly. I think it takes like 4 or 5 minutes for it to cure to the point where you can mess around with it, shim your gears, that kind of stuff. Now, that's not to say that a super glue, Gorilla Glue, or epoxy won't work. I actually have a couple guns that have either Gorilla Glue, not super glue, but a Gorilla Glue or an epoxy, and they're holding up perfectly fine. My P-Boys M4, I epoxied those those bushings into the gearbox. They're not moving at all. But it's just like, it's a lot easier to use a bearing Loctite. It's the proper tool. You're going to get more consistent, adherent, and application from gun to gun. With epoxy or a Gorilla Glue, it's going to take more time to dry, obviously, which is going to extend the amount of time you need to work on your gun. And some bushings are going to be in a good place and not move, others aren't. My P-Boys M4 was able to hold them in place. My Phantom Mark I was not able to. So just use bearing Loctite. It's the right tool. It's going to be a lot easier. That's what I recommend. But yeah, no need to change it. If you have your bushings and epoxy in place, don't go hammering them out. You're just going to make a mess. Have to get replacement bushings anyway. So if your gun's still working fine, just use what you have. But for moving forward, that's what I would recommend. Now, as far as other lubrication, Super Lube, silicone oil works really well. I also use liquid bearings. I use these intermittent for like lubricating bearings on the piston head or spring guide. So, I use liquid bearings sometimes. If I have to polish a gearbox, I'll polish it, clean it off, and then put a coat of this over the entire gearbox shell. And this makes it super smooth. Both oils work really well. I use them interchangeably. But yeah. Now I'm going to kind of breeze through these last few parts, but most of these parts you can get on McMaster Car. If you don't know what McMaster Car is, it's pretty much an online hardware retailer. They sell a lot of small items in bulk, such as screws, bolts, washers, O-rings, what have you. If you didn't know this, airsoft guns use standard metric sized, for the most part, because they are mainly built overseas, metric sized screws, O-rings, and everything that you can find from these hardware stores. So if you need a replacement cylinder head O-ring, McMaster Car's got you covered. If you need replacement O-rings for your air nozzle, McMaster Car got you covered. Piston heads, McMaster Car's got you covered. Even things such as tensioning springs for tappet plates, I was able to buy these in bulk. Much stronger than the stock ones. Better material, they don't break. Those are able to help your gun feed 50 rounds a second plus with those tappet plate springs. Also, if you're going to adjust angle engagement, I started using these metal washers instead of sorbothane pads. It's a little more consistent. You're able to get more fine-tuned adjustments to your angle engagement this way versus getting thick pads. It's kind of like less set in stone. This is more so shimming your angle engagement like you shim your gears rather than just throwing on a sorbothane pad and calling it a day. You're going to get much better piston longevity out of your gun. It's going to cycle smoother, all that good stuff. Not going to worry about pre-engagement. Gearbox screws, again, these are M3 screws. Most airsoft guns use M3 size screws. Link in the description to these. All this stuff, by the way, if you didn't see before, I have O-rings for air nozzles, different materials, and I also have O-rings for cylinder heads. And then I also have, didn't get them out, but O-rings for piston heads. I got these from the hardware store. You can find them from McMaster Car as well. And McMaster Car is great because they have different materials. If you want a Buna rubber, if you want a Viton rubber, EDPM rubber, a silicone rubber, look them up. They have their different use cases. But yeah, you can get really nerdy in that kind of stuff if you want. Now, I was able to get all this stuff for like $60. McMaster Car has a lot of warehouses similar to Amazon in most major cities and states, so I was able to buy mine and get next day delivery for like $8. So you're not gonna be spending too much on shipping or have a long wait time to get these parts. Plus, most of them are in bulk. The parts that I got are like usually in quantities of either 10, 25, 50, even 100. So you're gonna be good for many airsoft guns to come. The only part that you don't necessarily get as easily are gonna be the anti-reversal latch springs. Now you can buy them from Retro Arms for really cheaply. You can just buy a brand new anti-reversal latch, which they're still pretty cheap. But yeah, anti-reversal latch springs I recommend Retro Arms. And then other small springs, if you still use stock trigger contacts, so on and so forth, SHS and Lonex parts still work really well, and they're cheap as well. So yeah, that's pretty much that with what I recommend as far as these parts go. I mean, higher quality gearbox screws make a huge difference. All the O-rings that I have, that I use and will have linked in the description, definitely do work. I might fine-tune and experiment with different size cylinder head O-rings, but again, everything I have will give you perfect air seal when you test it and shoot and give you really good consistency. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Those are the same parts that I was using to fine-tune my AK-105, or excuse me, AKS-74U, even with these stock parts. These little things here and there, the greases, bearing Loctite, washers for AOE, O-rings, gearbox screws, all help this thing stay together and keep it in its top peak performance. Like I said, 400 FPS at 20 rounds a second on like a $35 gearbox. That's pretty freaking good. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.